I just have a quick question before we get started. How many folks were in the M2M or IoT business for more than 5 years? We got a decent handful. Is it possible to turn up the house lights a little bit just so I can see? Plus, it seems like a disco in here with all these lights. So I've been working for Jasper for about 7 years. And when I first started, of course, back then it was generally known as machine-to-machine or M2M. And the true test, certainly in the technology space, of one, how good a marketer you are, and two, how viable your product set is can you explain to your mom what you do? And so I was trying to explain to my mom what machine-to-machine is, and I was drawing these examples, and I was talking about trucks and these OBD2 devices, and I was talking about security panels. And then she said, "That's very exciting, dear," and kind of went off and continued cooking lunch. This past weekend, I was at my mom's house. She had a friend over, and the friend said, "So, Macario, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, blah, 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 Internet of Things." And my mom says, "Oh, you're working on the Internet of Things. Fascinating. That's great. I think that's a very, very hot space." And so deep down inside, it's like, I've made it. My mom knows what I actually do for a living. So it was very, very impressive. Certainly, the market has come around quite a bit. So I just wanted to provide a brief overview of Jasper, then kind of talk some more about what we see at the enterprise level. When I talk about enterprises, I'm thinking about these companies building these connected device applications. So for those who are familiar with Jasper, what we do is we provide a platform that is tightly integrated into the mobile networks and then provided to the device manufacturers. We look at the network as an asset. We don't consider it connectivity and or even think about it as things like managed connectivity or look at it as a cost center. We think of it really as an incredibly intelligent asset that, if used properly, can actually have a very dramatic effect on the downstream experience of the application that you're trying to provide. And our job, of course, is to turn that network into a very valuable asset. And I think you'll hopefully find that there's some good examples of that out there in the marketplace today. Today, we've partnered with 15 mobile operator groups. They represent over 100 wireless operators around the world, working across all 5, so I guess now 6 continents. You can see some of the names there, Telefonica certainly being one, so thank you, Angel. Arguably more interesting, though, are the enterprises that have standardized on our platform. Today, we have over 2,500 enterprises. I use the word enterprise very loosely just to basically describe connected device application builders, VARs, SIs, people who actually have devices out in the field and are really using the mobile network to connect them across a whole different range of vertical industries. Right? The one box we at Jasper place ourselves in is that we're focused on the mobile network. So Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, certainly good, viable technologies, but nothing to do with us. One of the very hot areas, of course, is also in the car space, and the idea of connected car. We're very proud to say that we have the most connected car OEMs on our platform as well. And this is a sample of the kind of companies that we work for. So, the challenge, I think, in this space is that the more vertical you go, the more fragmented it really is. And these highly disparate vertical applications get more and more challenging as you try and think through, how can I serve so many of these when, in fact, their applications are so vastly different? Fortunately, for a company like us, the way that these organizations actually use the network asset is relatively common across these highly disparate vertical applications. So I want to basically lay out for you what we see across these verticals, across these different kinds of enterprises, some common requirements that the enterprise needs to be successful in the mobile Internet of Things space. Before I go through the top 5, there is one that, for you poker players, we just consider table stakes. It is simply a highly reliable service. If you don't have a highly reliable and available service, then you have nothing, right? That's your table stakes. No matter what, you got to be able to deliver that. Assuming that for the moment, one of the biggest requirements is enabling the enterprise to have a business model that works. And business model is a very loaded term. It can imply what they're selling to their customers, which could be consumers, other enterprises. It also implies their cost structure, but it's really the totality of it. And I think there's 2 really interesting examples here. Amazon Kindle, which I'm sure most of you have heard of Amazon Kindle, had probably was the most inspiring in terms of the use of its business model, because for the very first time, they sold a connected device, and the consumer did nothing to make that connectivity go. They just had to power on the device. And Amazon completely took care of the rest. And it was done through a wholesale relationship, first with Sprint and AT&T and Vodafone and others. And they basically paid for connectivity to the device. And they didn't do so because they're wonderful people. They did so because they wanted to sell more books. So if you have always available access to the store, and that was the whole premise, then then the propensity to buy more books is going to be higher. And it was a very elegant, very simple business model. And it started with, what does the consumer want, and how do we make money off this device? Amazon has now gone on into the tablet business, and they're exploring all different kinds of new business models about how to change the tablet business around too. So we're pretty close with them. We're going to see some interesting things coming their way. More recently, General Motors. General Motors is second largest car manufacturer in the world by units shipped. And they're also one of the pioneers in the connected car service. They created a telematics service called OnStar, which is deployed in every single vehicle sold in North America, now in Mexico via Telefonica, soon coming to the rest of Europe. They're also in China. OnStar basically is a button you can press. For those who are not familiar, a button you can press, you can speak to an agent. If you're in an accident, it will automatically notify the authorities. Sort of early ideas of e-call that you see, start to see debated here in Europe. So they give effectively a free trial with every vehicle. If you buy the low-end vehicle, you get about 3 months of OnStar service. You go buy a Cadillac, you get 2 years. And so it varies depending on the kind of segments. And then at the end of that trial period, they try and get you to subscribe. Now, I don't know GM's specific numbers, but the industry as a whole gets about a 20% resubscription rate. So that doesn't sound too bad, except when you think about it in the opposite, which is 80% of the people who've been using a service, who had a service, said, no, thanks, I'm not willing to pay for it. And that kind of sucks. I mean, it's just not a very good number, right? So they're also looking at other ways of being able to monetize the hardware that they have now put into that car. They made an announcement this past February that they're going to embed LTE inside of every vehicle worldwide. That's going to start with the 2015 model year cars in roughly about summer in North America, and then quickly going on into Europe, China, Latin America. But it is part of their global strategy. Now, if they're only getting an 80% resubscription rate or a 20% resubscription rate today, why are they making such a big leap to take on the cost of an LTE module and all the things that go with it? Well, they're actually expanding the program. So they have. They're going to turn the car into a Wi-Fi hotspot. They're partnering with AT&T to be able to sell those kinds of services in North America, so that AT&T actually is going to hopefully get some new customers out of it. And they're also going to have a CRM or VRM, Vehicle Relationship Management Program, so they're going to be able to have connectivity to the vehicle whenever necessary for accident purposes. So it's and a few other tricks up their sleeve which are not yet publicly announced, but it's actually it's a very exciting program, and we're seeing now many car manufacturers go down this path. So the question is, how do they monetize that? Part of it is wholesale. Part of it is actually consumer retail. Imagine AT&T selling retail Wi-Fi plans or mobile broadband plans to GM drivers worldwide. And so you're going to have two different kinds of billing relationships. Suddenly the complexity zooms up, and you also have a single modem, a single SIM card inside of that vehicle. And then you got to be able to do that on a worldwide basis, so that you can have those consumers being able to buy services in France and Italy from the people that they're willing to buy connectivity from. So it's pretty exciting. The second requirement is operational automation. This is really a function of how do you scale? How do you scale? So when I first started at Jasper, I spent some time in Brazil, and I was talking with some enterprises down there, and I said, so tell me, how do you work with your operator today? How do you run your business? And they said, well, what we do is whenever we sell, this was a stolen vehicle tracking company. Whenever we sell a device, then what we do is we call up the mobile operator and we say, can you please activate or turn on this SIM card so we can get connectivity? And he said, but we call the normal consumer call center because that's what they have. And the rules within the call center are they can work on only 5 SIMs at a time, and then you have to hang up and you have to call back. But they're selling at a clip of 200 or 300 a day. It's a very fast-moving business. And then there's a person basically dedicated to just calling And they go through 5 SIMs, and they hang up, and they dial again, they call, and they go through 5 SIMs. It's just totally ridiculous, right? You can't scale a business that way. Now, clearly, the world has started to change, but it's a perfect example of that. Allstate is a very large insurance company in North America. They have, they're doing the pay-as-you-drive insurance program. And they have all kinds of variability in the usage of their devices in terms of utilization of the network. So at any given month, they don't really know how much data people are going to use because it all depends on how much they're driving, how often they're connecting, things of that nature, and that can vary quite a bit. So what they do is they actually program in a set of rules that at the very beginning of every billing cycle, they have everybody starts at the lowest data plan that they have agreed. And then as usage acquires, once they reach certain thresholds, then it will automatically jump up to the next available tariff or rate plan that makes most sense. So at the end of the billing cycle, they're completely right-sized. And they're not overpaying for services they're not actually using. And it's all completely programmatic. So it's an example of how do you do a tremendous amount of automation. Another pay-as-you-go insurance company, not Allstate, another one, to give you an indication of how fast this is growing, adding 1,000 devices a day in the United States. It's just booming. ABB, an organization we're supporting in Europe through one of their industrial manufacturing devices, they worry about being able to monitor whether those devices are appropriately sending in the right data at the right time and whether they're working in the way that they should. So they actually program rules that say if a device hasn't actually established a data connection within a 24-hour period, automatically send an API message to the application layer to take a bunch of proprietary actions. Because that's a device that's not behaving as expected. And they can do, so these are the elements that allow them to actually scale up their business. If it's all manual or you're waiting for somebody to look or spot trends, it's never going to be able to scale. Real-time visibility, this is absolutely vital. So Securitas, a very large security company, they are particularly concerned about the ability to send an alarm over the mobile network. Now, in the security space, what we've seen is that most of these home and office security system companies are moving away from fixed line as their primary communication channel, mostly because fixed line in the home is starting to go away. You're seeing more and more voice over IP, or a lot of people just using their mobile phones and they're ditching their landlines. Or if you're in the emerging world, you just completely bypass landlines. But there's this concern that the mobile network is not as reliable as fixed line. So if an alarm goes off and they don't have a connection available, that's a major problem for them. So they're constantly monitoring to make sure that connection is actually going to be available. And the very second it drops, they get an automatic and instant notification to the call center saying there's a problem with this device. It's not going to be able to send an alarm if an alarm actually goes off. So that monitoring is absolutely vital, be able to have real-time visibility into the health of that connection. St. Jude Medical is a medical device manufacturer. They provide units that are given to patients who recently had some kind of heart surgery, a lot of heart transplants or open heart surgery, and it's a little desktop unit that sits by the bed, and you hold up a sensor to something inside your heart, and you put it down, and it automatically sends this information up to the doctor or to the clinic. So and they're typically sent on sort of temporary loan for a few weeks, a few months during the recovery period, given to patients, typically a little on the older side, are typically pretty, not in the greatest shape. So everything has to be able to just work seamlessly. All they want to request of the patient is to plug it in. And a lot of medical devices that I think in the earlier days will say, well, let's just get Bluetooth and we can work on the Wi-Fi. They don't want to mess around with any of that because you're not dealing with a patient who's capable of that kind of technology in that particular state. So they need to know right away that, in fact, that device is actually working. And so there's a time period as to when that device goes out on loan to ensure that it actually got up on the network properly. And if not, then the home gets a phone call saying, hey, there's a problem. We see that this didn't connect. All right, did you plug it in? OK, let's try and remotely troubleshoot exactly what's happening. Which leads us to the next issue, the ability to resolve issues fast. Unfortunately, the connectivity of devices is not as seamless as I think we would all like it to be. And so there are instances where devices simply do not perform as expected. And most of these devices, as you all well know, don't have user interfaces. They're embedded in some bigger piece of machinery. And to be able to resolve issues remotely is particularly key. Konica Minolta provides copier machines. They have their entire connected program is called CS Remote Care. The whole point is they're going to remotely service your copier machine, right? You got a paper jam, you're out of ink, there's some kind of problem, you got to wait for a technician to come in, it slows down productivity of the office. They said that we're embed something inside of the copier, we'll be able to remotely understand what the issues are, understand the error codes, and if we can actually fix it remotely, we will. Or if not, then we know to send a technician right away to be able to shorten the resolution time. So that's on their application side, but if they're unable to actually reach that copier, because there's some kind of a connection or connectivity problem, they need to know exactly what that is right away. So to be able to have real-time diagnostics in the capability set to be able to resolve issues is particularly key for them. And Ingenico provides point-of-sale terminals, credit card terminals. They actually distribute through banks who then continue on to merchants. So your local corner store that has a credit card swipe machine probably didn't get that from Ingenico, they got it from the local bank. So what Ingenico does is they don't want to be the point of contact for every little issue. Because they don't even know who has these devices in many cases, so they actually give access to all of the information about the SIM, the device, directly to the banks, and let the banks actually take the first call, so that they're not holding up the line, and that's particularly key. Interesting story actually about Konica Minolta as well. We've been working with them for, I don't know, 5 years, something to that effect. And Konica Minolta did a very interesting total cost of ownership analysis. Because you got to think, copiers, they're not mobile devices. They're all in office buildings, and office buildings have Ethernet. And so why don't they just plug into the local company's Ethernet or their local LAN, and it's all effectively free. Why would anybody pay for the modem and pay for the connectivity on a monthly basis? So they actually did a TCO analysis and found that it was actually cheaper for them to be able to completely own the experience. So including the BOM cost of a cellular module, including the connectivity cost on a monthly basis, rather than have to ask each one of their customers, hey, can you punch a hole in your firewall? Can you let me through? Oh, I see there's a problem. Let me get my customer's IT team to go help me resolve this. They wanted a completely self-contained experience, and that's what they have today. They want as few sources as possible. There's a phrase that's basically everybody wants a single throat to choke, and the bigger the throat, the better. So VW is a good case of this. VW with their CarNet program actually single sourced that from Verizon Telematics. The program is actually delivered by Verizon Telematics, but actually deployed globally by AT&T. So Verizon and AT&T, interestingly enough, strange bedfellows for sure. But they wanted to be able to have just one singular vendor, one single throat to choke. And actually the AT&T relationship is managed by Verizon Telematics. Garmin is another example. So Garmin, we actually support worldwide for their connected P&D services and other devices. They actually work across 3 operators, AT&T, Rogers, and KPN, but they have a singular platform, a single API set, a single report system, a single resolution system. It's an operational standard that they require in order to scale, right? The more APIs, the more different ways of doing things, it's just too challenging for a lot of these organizations. And then we see some emerging requirements. I wouldn't necessarily make the top 5 yet, but I think by certain verticals, they're getting to be quite interesting, and the clamor for some of these is growing. So the reprogrammable SIM, the ability to change the profile of SIM from one operator to another, very, very hot topic of debate, especially in the connected car space, consumer electronics. A lot of high bandwidth devices in order to go back and sort of single source, if you will, but then still get the benefits of local service and local economics. Split billing or split rating, bifurcated billing, all the same words to describe the same, all different words to describe the same thing. Very, very hot in the connected car space. So the example I was talking about with GM, right? You have 2 billers. Consumer pays GM for OnStar services, pays AT&T for Wi-Fi inside of the vehicle. Those are 2 different billing services, 2 different data streams, but there's a single SIM and a single modem. How do you do that? That's the notion of split rating. Operational SLAs, a very hot topic. Certainly the larger organizations are attempting to flex their muscle against the mobile operators to say, I want guaranteed uptime, a network availability, and I want financial penalties to go with it. And there's some challenges there, especially in places where there's a roaming environment. You don't control the network. And how do you guarantee that? And that's a very hot topic of debate. And certainly big data analytics, there's much talk about that here today. I won't go into too much detail, except to say that the network is not immune to being a valuable data source for these organizations. And the network can actually be a very powerful data source in addition to the application data to make sense of how to really grow this business. So I'm happy to answer questions by email if you'd like. There's my email address. Feel free to contact me if you'd like any follow-up.
Awesome. Thanks, Macario.